All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome and thank you for being here tonight for our first community meeting on the improvements to Ronan Park. My name is Keisha Ofeish, and I'm the project manager with the Boston Parks and Rec Department. Before we dive into the presentation, I just want to quickly go over a few things about how tonight will go and what to expect. We didn't receive any requests for language interpretation tonight, but please keep in mind that this is a free service that you can request for future meetings. All right, so meeting recording. Tonight's meeting is being recorded and will be available on the project webpage within the next week. Feel free to share the link with any neighbors who might be interested but couldn't make it tonight, or if you want to rewatch the presentation. I'll put the link in the chat for you right now. During the presentation, please keep your microphone muted and video off to avoid distractions. During the discussion session, we encourage you to turn your video on if you feel comfortable doing so. Next, virtual meeting etiquette. We want to make sure this is a positive experience for everyone and that all community members feel comfortable sharing their comments and questions. Please be respectful of each other's time since we only have an hour and a half together tonight. Let's keep things moving along. We'd also ask that you keep questions and comments focused on the project. Please wait until everyone has had a chance to ask a question or share a comment before asking additional ones. Next. During the presentation, feel free to use Zoom's nonverbal prompts or the chat. When we get to the Q&A, we'd love for you to turn on your camera so we can all connect. And then when it's your turn to speak, please unmute yourself to ask your question and remute yourself afterwards. Next. Tonight's agenda includes an introduction to the project team, an update on the wall repairs, an overview of the project schedule and goals, and a presentation on the site analysis and existing conditions. We will then open the floor to a listening and discussion session to hear your thoughts. Next. As I mentioned earlier, my name is Keisha Ofeish. I'm the project manager from the Parks Department. Also joining us from Boston Parks are Kathy Baker Eclipse, the director of the capital plan, and Michael McMillan, the Community Outreach Coordinator. Michael is our moderator for tonight. Anthony Wynn, our Mid-Dorchester representative from the Office of Neighborhood Services, is here. And our design team for the project is Klopfer Martin Design Group, which I'll refer to as KMDG. From their team, we have Kaki Martin, Jen Ng, Melita Schmeckpepper, and Dora Mugerwa. Now, if there are any elected officials or other staff members present, please feel free to introduce yourself and share a few words now. Okay. Doesn't sound like it, so I will keep going. Next. So I'm going to turn it over to Kathy Baker Eclipse right now for a quick update on the wall repairs that are happening along the Robinson Street side of Ronan Park.
Thanks, Keisha. My name's Kathy Baker Eclipse. I'm the director of capital plan, like Keisha just said. And we have been monitoring the condition of this wall along the southern property line of Ronan Park for a year plus. You'll see that there's some significant cracking that's being pointed to, and there's also a large horizontal crack that is actively moving. That shadow line is not supposed to be there. So we are very concerned about the structural integrity of this wall, and have engaged an engineering firm to design the repairs, and we're going to be putting that out to bid shortly. This seems to be limited to just behind one home on that frontage. So our repairs are limited to immediately behind the 33 Robinson Street. So in our design plans, we plan on accessing this area from the park through the Marie Street side, and coming through the park at the vehicular entrance, and then we're coming around to the southern side of the ball field. The area that we're concerned about is right behind the kind of center right sports light structure. So we think if we can have the next plan. So this is a section of what the repairs are going to look like. We're going to remove that portion of the wall from the park side that is failing, and build a new concrete wall that will be tied to the existing wall with reinforcement. So this is as minimal as we think we can provide. It is a significant wall, and does seem to date back beyond any of our records, but we did some test pits earlier, um, so we have confidence that this will resolve the issue. Um, because the landscape behind that wall is sloping down, and there's the kind of stem footing that will extend back horizontally into the park. We think we need to do quite a bit of excavation in order to build that, which will impact the pathway, which we will be rebuilding. Um, and there is a high likelihood that this will impact the remaining. It's about a 24-inch oak tree. We did remove some of the other trees immediately behind there to lighten the live load on that wall to hopefully slow down the failure progression. But we think by needing to excavate that area that we may be undermining those roots. So in order to fulfill the tree ordinance protection that we have, we're sharing this information with you that there's a high likelihood that this tree will be negatively impacted. So we are going, if we can have the next drawing, this is a plan. We are going to be replacing it with replacing the vegetation in this area with some small trees, some small flowering trees, some Amelanchier, serviceberry, to reestablish that vegetated edge that provides some protection and some ball protection. We do plan on bidding it next month or into early April, and planning on mobilizing as soon as we can, so that we can address this failure. We do have a source of funding from the capital plan. I don't anticipate that this construction period will be very long. 30 to 60 days is what I'm anticipating. And our goal is to try to minimize the impact to the playing field as much as possible. So really keeping the construction zone really tight to the work area, but we will require some laydown area and to accommodate some vehicle movement through there. So that's a big picture plan of what we're doing. We did remove some of the vegetation. I see there was a question in the chat. We did remove some of the vegetation at the top of that wall prior to undergoing this, because we knew that the additional load of those trees had the potential to negatively impact the failure rate of that wall, and there's a high likelihood that it will collapse. So they were removed by the Parks Department. They were invasive Norway maples. That does not mean that they did not have any ecological value, but they were we're going to be replanting this area with native species that will enhance the ecological value along this edge. So that's just a little bit of background about that. So yes, Robert, I see your comment, and I don't want to take too much time away from the main purpose of this, and we will be following up. So that seems, so if there's any other questions or comments, I think I'm happy to answer them.
Great. Thank you, Kathy. All right,
Thank
so
you.
let's now get into the project at hand, which is improvements to Ronan Park's upper terrace and basketball courts. Next. All right, project schedule and funding. The project began this winter with a site analysis phase to better understand the current conditions of Ronan Park and the types of activities and events that typically happen there. We launched a community pulse check survey that some of you may have filled out for us, to gather initial input on what residents want and value in the park. This feedback, along with especially what we hear tonight, will help guide the design process. In tonight's meeting, the design team will share what we've learned so far. Then they'll create design concepts based on your input, which will be presented at our second meeting in April. After that, the concepts will be refined and a final vision will be shared in June. This summer, we'll begin developing construction documents with construction bidding expected in spring 2026 and potentially starting construction as soon as maybe summer 2026. The estimated cost of construction is $2.35 million. Next. We are often asked about how design decisions are made. So please know that park design is guided by a few key factors. There are safety and regulatory guidelines like ADA, the goals of parks and recreation, the City of Boston's priorities, and most importantly, there we go. Most importantly, community input, which is exactly why we're here tonight, to gather your input and guidance to help shape the design process. Next. All right, so the City of Boston has some key priorities that we aim to address in every parks project, including delivering exceptional services, promoting green spaces, creating family-friendly areas, closing the racial wealth gap, and building a healthy, safe city. Next. Go. The Parks Department also has goals such as creating accessible, diverse, and balanced spaces, fostering meaningful community engagement, ensuring spaces are adaptive and resilient, and promoting connections. Next. Okay, so with that, I will turn it over to Kaki and Jen from Klopfer Martin to start the design presentation.
Just gonna get us started a little bit, and then also, Josh, I see you asked about the survey, if it's still open. We have another survey at the end that we can distribute, and also you can do a QR code to link you directly to it. Um, so, one of the great things about Ronan Park is that it is not a blank slate. It is a vibrant place, and the comments here are just validating that. And it's vibrant because of the people who care for it. We know that Ronan Park has a community that plays with flag football and the kite festival, and also the kickball league. Very active. It's a community that gathers. Somebody mentioned yoga in the park as one of their favorite things, and just like how delightful that is to have a neighborhood resource that lets you have yoga outside, and then also movie nights. Community that engages. So it's not just about having program on the park and using the park, it's also about caring for the park with the daffodil cleanup program, and then also the Teen Urban Tree Corps, which has 20 to 30 Boston youth that are learning about trees, advocating for trees, and advocating for Boston's urban forest. And then also a community that collaborates. And so this idea that organizations are really investing in Ronan Park and having intergenerational togetherness, and then also just really increasing activity. So with that, I think Dora has just put in a comment that's, please feel free to share about, what you like to do at Ronan Park, what events you like. You can think about them throughout the course of the presentation, throughout the course of the discussion, and just add to the chat. We love hearing about all the things there are to do.
So I'm going to jump in now and take the handoff from Jen. And good evening, everybody. I'm Kaki Martin with Klopfer Martin Design Group. And I think Keisha mentioned, well, what have we been doing? Mentioned that we've been sort of diving in and starting to learn about the site. So we've done a site visit, and I have the next series of slides are really us also sort of analyzing and putting context to the park. A lot of this are things you probably already know. And this is sort of just some reminders in a way, and we look forward to seeing if somehow we've missed something. So one thing we typically do is put a park in context of the other open spaces near it. You can see Ronan sitting right there in the middle of the graphic, and there are two dashed circles around Ronan. One is representing a half a mile away, which typically takes is a 10 to 15 minute walk. Maybe maybe with some of the steep slopes, it's definitely leans more toward the 15-minute side. And then the mile circle is the outer one, which equates to more like a 15 to 22-minute walk typically. And what we're really just astonished to see is the numbers of open spaces within a mile of Ronan. And Ronan's really sitting, at the top of a high point, and that's what, of course, creates those just magical, incredible views. But it's sort of wonderful to see a series of smaller scale neighborhood parks. Many of these places you also probably spend time. And then if we go to the next slide, we zoom in a little bit more and really focus in on that half-mile radius and start to see, well, what other activities are happening in some of the nearby parks. Doherty Gibson also has sport courts and play, but Allen and Coppens and Fernald Terrace tend to be more passive, or in fact, even in the case of Fernald Terrace, are actually more wooded. So there's an array of things happening, some more passive, and Ronan, as you know, really offers everything, just about. Next slide. Also, just to sort of put in context, and this is really a reflection of the community and view of the neighbors, all the variety of institutions and organizations that are within that half-mile walking distance to Ronan, and use it perhaps for events and help support Ronan and participate there. So really looking at a really remarkable, diverse schools, churches, et cetera, organizations that are within that half-mile, 10 to 15-minute walk of the park. And we want to make sure that we're keeping everybody in mind. So our next little chapter here is really the site analysis. How do we as landscape architects sort of start to see it? A lot of times we really go back to the history. This park was initially designed in 1913. This is an old park. And there was a series of updates that happened. You can see that really most of them have happened in the past, say 50 years, with most recently kind of the most dramatic amount happening since in the past, say 20 years, with even new programming added. So the park remained relatively passive with just sort of paths and trees and lawn for a very long time until the 70s and then the 90s, and more of these sort of slightly more active pieces have been added to the park. Next slide. So to clarify, Kathy talked about the work that the Parks Department's doing to repair the wall on the sort of south end of the park, and Jen's pointing to that there toward the lower park. This project is focused on what we're calling the upper park, and the sort of 5 starred entries that you see. So we're up off Mount Ida and Marie and Percival Street for the most part, and the basketball courts. So just to clarify, that's what our team and this project is focusing on, is the upper park. Next slide. So a few beginning observations that we hope sort of will help fuel conversation or comments in the chat. First, and you can see the photos are associated with those numbers. So the first very clear observation we had is that, wow, those swings are wonderful. And whenever we've been to the park, people are on the swings, and they are really exposed to the sun and are sitting in a place without shade. The second is that I think just generally there are some really wonderful mature trees out there, and that there are some that provide some shade for the playground, which is fantastic. And also down to the basketball courts, there's really visible cracks and some problems with the surfacing, as well as the backboards clearly needing some upgrades. The views, I've mentioned it already, you all know this. image number 6 in particular just is incredibly compelling, and I love seeing in the chat how many folks just love spending time up there, and I would do the same if I lived nearby. It's incredible, and a reminder that this Boston is a city on the water. It's a really sort of special feature of this park. So there are places to sit in the shade, there are benches, and that there are kind of a variety of walking routes that are available in the park as well. So that view is partly afforded by the incredible topography, and this sort of orange diagram here really shows the high point, which is about where the play equipment is. Which you all probably know, and then everything slopes down really on all sides, down to the low point for this project, which is the basketball court. This also obviously with water running downhill, we know that the storm water is moving down to those lower areas just naturally down the hill. And that topography, and oh, sorry, just go back for 1 second, Jen, just as a visual clue or cue for all of you, where those white lines represent a topographic grade line, we call it. And when those lines are more spread out, it's flatter. When those lines stack up very close to each other, like between the numbers 116 and 132, that's steeper. So you all know this from spending a lot of time there, but that's how this sort of also kind of a topography plan maps out and gives us those clues. So you can see that that high point is also relatively flat, which we all know, and that's where the play equipment is. So that topography really comes into play, next slide, thanks, on with the paths and the circulation. So this is a diagram showing us technically when we get in and do the math, we can understand, well, how steep are those different slopes? And the yellow and white is really showing a sort of moderate park path slope. Where it gets red is when they really become quite steep. And there could be some challenges there, or maybe an interest in having a route that is less steep. We also know that there's that the kind of corner of Percival and Marie is the place where the maintenance access happens. And we are also very aware that adjacent to the down at the lower part of the upper park, in where the blue is indicated, that there are some can be some problems with drainage there and buildup of water. So we know that's a key issue that we're going to want to mediate and remedy and try to fix in these improvements. So Kathy referenced the tree ordinance earlier when she was talking about the trees, and it looked like from the chat that folks definitely noticed that some trees had to be removed. So using, we're sort of mapping for you the trees in the upper park here. And the ordinance has us think about trees as two zones. The first is the critical root zone, which is the area immediately surrounding the trunk. And it's based on how big that yellow dot is for each tree, is based on the caliper, the size, the diameter of the trunk of each tree. Then beyond that, which helps us set the guidelines for how the construction fence would be set and how the trees would be protected, is the tree protection zone. So that's an area even further offset outside of that original critical root zone. This diagram is showing, I want to say that with the tree ordinance, part of these projects also entails a tree survey by certified arborists and a tree assessment. That is currently underway. The assessment report is currently underway. And when we come back to meet with you for meeting number 2, we will have feedback and the data to share with you about what the outcome of that assessment is. So this graphic is really showing an assumption that every tree that's out there is very healthy. That may not be the case. So again, we'll update you at the next meeting, but I just want to be clear. This is making an assumption that based on what we know right now, even though perhaps some of you could tell by observations, there could be some health issues with some trees. This is showing an assumption that everything's healthy and every tree is staying. When we go to the next slide, and we map those tree shapes, become orange, where we kind of put them into a category of constraints because we have to be very careful around those existing trees. We start to map a few of the things I've been talking about. Where are the opportunities for improvement? That's sort of showing up in blue. And again, the orange constraint, we're sort of assuming that every tree is staying, meaning every tree is very, very healthy. And we're also noting that there's the paths that need improvement that we know of so far. Some of them actually are crossing over into those tree zones. So we would need to navigate that carefully. So it's sort of a puzzle in a way. What we're laying out for you is a puzzle that's sort of still evolving, and you are a huge part of this puzzle. And we really are looking forward to the discussion tonight, to hear about what priorities are and what really your vision for the park improvements are. So anyway, with that, I think a lot of talking, and we want to now hear from you, and also certainly to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, so definitely want to hear from everyone. And we also want to acknowledge that the Pulse Check survey just gave us a lot of really great um, starting data to work with, and that the Pulse Check survey isn't even really the first point of contact. Lots of feedback coming from the Friends of Ronan Park, and that also there has been community engagement through Artists for Humanity and Speak for the Trees in November, and we received that feedback as well. So, lots of really great pieces of information for us to work with. We have a little bit of a prompt, which is what's your favorite memory? What's your favorite wish? And we're going to work through the pulse check survey by area. Looks like there was a lot of themes that were coming up, but we can also just start out with conversation if that makes sense too. It looks like there's quite a few people who have their hands raised and ready to give us some comments. Does that?
I think that's possible. I just wanted to say that there's a few different ways for everyone to engage. You can post questions in the chat and we will respond to them in order. Or at the bottom of the screen, you'll see an icon with 3 dots. In there, you can raise your hand if you'd like to be recognized. Once called on, please unmute yourself, and then after your question, please remute yourself. And before we start with some questions and answers, I just want to recognize that Representative Chris Worrell joined the call. And Christopher, if you'd like to share anything, please feel free to go ahead and speak now. All right, Jen, go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so I guess I could go one of two ways. We could do a choose your own adventure. It looks like hands are popping up and we can just start with conversation. If that makes sense, it seems like people are pretty eager to give some feedback. Oh, okay. I saw N pop up on my screen first with their hand raised.
Cool, thank you. I just wanted to comment that a lot of people use the parks, including youth and elders, and also our homeless community. And whatever improvements are made, I would love if they do not include hostile architecture. So benches where people can lay out would be great. Those kind of things. But that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you. Noted.
Let's see. I also saw Jeff pop up on my screen as well.
Well, interesting you say that, Anne, because we had a discussion about that with Arts and Humanity, and came to the conclusion of the exact opposite, that we wanted to discourage benches where you could sleep, and came up with a kind of design that would discourage that. So that's something I think should be addressed. I think we need to get unhoused people the help they need, but I'm not sure they should be camping out on the basketball courts like they were 2 years ago, or on the benches. So that's just something to think about. My question was really about 2.53 million. That's for Upper Park and basketball and retaining wall.
The retaining wall has a separate line. So we're anticipating that cost will not be coming from the overall project budget for this work.
So 2.5 million for splash pad and the basketball courts. Are you planning any like plumbing, or I don't know exactly how the whole system works, but the splash pad is about, I don't know, more than 10 years old. Are you planning any engineering work on that?
Yes, part of our team, Jeff, includes engineers who will help us with any drainage, anything related to the splash pad. So there, there's some of that budget is going to go to things that people won't be seeing, but will be helping support and resolve some issues on the surface. So we are the landscape architects leads of this team, and we have consultants that working with us on all the various types of engineering that will be needed.
Okay, because drainage was a big problem when we first built the splash pad, and had to kind of reconfigure it. So I think that's an important consideration. As for the basketball courts, you're in touch with whom? Arts with Humanity? Who's deciding the mural? I know I filled out a survey on that.
Artists for Humanity is working on having a community involved mural painting project with local, I think, youth. And that is separate from our project. And that would likely happen before our project started construction.
Okay, but do you have to do, I mean, you don't have to do any reconstruction work on that retaining wall? Because that would be just dumb.
We're anticipating for the basketball court scope to just include resurfacing the court and putting in new backboards and hoops.
How about taking down all the poison ivy behind it?
I think that would be part of our maintenance plan for moving forward with the park.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Why don't we go to Arvid?
Great. First, thank you so much for organizing this. This is really helpful, and thanks for all the work on this. 3 quick questions. The first question is, are there any efforts to work with the Boston Little Saigon Cultural District on maybe expanding some of their activities into Ronan Park once it's redone? You know, they have their night market and all of these activities, and I think if the space gets upgraded, that would be great to expand into that when they're doing their events. That's my first question. Second question is about safety, so without scaring anyone, but of course there have been these recent robberies, and I'm not a design expert, but I'm sure there are certain things that can be done in terms of architecture to like keep an area like safer, or incorporate that. So how does that factor into your plans? And the third one has to do with open with a beautiful view and the trees? And how do we make sure that if we plant additional trees, that they do not obstruct the view too much? Because that can be a downside. And I give you one very specific example on the, I think you called it the lower park side, where someone planted these new small trees. They're going to eventually obstruct the beautiful view for the people who live on the other side of Mount Ida Road. So the people who live there are going to lose that view. And the same might be true for like different places in the park. So what's the trade-off between, planting more trees, but also making sure the view remains as beautiful as it is and there's enough open space, which is also important. And one last thing, is there any email or phone number that you can maybe leave in the chat, one central point of contact if we have follow-up questions? And thanks again for doing all of this.
Thank you. That was 3 questions. Keisha, do you want me to dive in or?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So, trees, we hear you, trees blocking views, that can happen, and we will work hard about, species selection and placement of those things. Will be something we'll be diving into. So the, location and species type really does impact that. Safety, the issue you brought up about safety, we hear you, and we'll be talking more with the Parks Department about that, and ensuring too that the lighting in the park is appropriate, which is one way that we that's very helpful to make sure things are properly lit. And then I'm forgetting what your first comment was, Arvid.
The
Little
Boston Little
Saigon.
Saigon, yeah.
Oh, yes. We are in sort of outreach mode, I would say, Keisha, right? And maybe that's the way to answer that we are really aware, and that's what that one plan that I put up really is indicating, that we know there are just, the neighborhood is so rich with so many organizations, and we are in, actively in outreach mode. And Keisha also has put her email into the chat, Arvid, which I think was actually your 4th comment or request. And she'll probably do that a few more times to make sure everybody sees it.
One of the things that Kaki and I talk a lot about is the next generation of trees and the next generation of tree canopy. So, while we think about the current generation of trees that we see here today, making sure that we're planning for a future so that then when the time is ready and the second generation is coming up into maturity, you are still getting those views, and maybe you get different pockets of views, right? New pockets of views are coming up.
Okay, so I'm going to go with the hands raised on the way folks are arranged on my screen. So Jason Law is next.
Thank you. The comment I wanted to make is that in the past year and a half, I've noticed that there have been multiple trash cans that were removed. I can think of at least 2, maybe more. Just wanted to ask if those can be reinstated. It would go a long way to incentivizing the many people who walk their dogs there to pick up their poop and throw it away if they don't have to walk all the way across the park to throw it away.
That's something that I can immediately reach out to our maintenance superintendent about and find out for you if those can be added back in. But then I'm sure as we go forward with the design as well, Kaki and her team will be incorporating a more substantial amount.
Yeah,
Excellent.
Yes,
I think,
yeah, and I see the comment about the covered ones, and Parks Now does, I think, have a standard for a covered one, and so we will be looking at that comprehensively. Absolutely.
I think, Jason, you're also kind of beating me to the punchline around park essentials. And so, some of the things that have come up through the Pulse Check survey and through our observations is things like functioning water fountains, not just the spray pad, but actually places to refill your water bottles. We've talked a little bit about drainage. There were comments that came up around bikes, plenty of comments that came up around trash cans and making sure that those were within easy access. And there was an early comment around making sure that there's a dedicated spot for porta potties so that they're not scattered around the park at any individual event. So those are some of the things that also came up as part of the pulse check survey.
Josh Wilson.
Before I just
sorry.
want to note that we do sometimes seasonally remove the trash barrels. So it's possible
right.
that they were removed for the winter, since we do less trash pickup in the winter. So it's possible that they may be redeployed in the summer, but I think Keisha will definitely follow up with our maintenance team and see if there's a possibility of expanding some in the short term.
Great, thanks, Kathy. Josh.
Thanks all. It's very, very exciting to see the possibility of this park getting some much needed love and attention. So really, really excited about that and grateful for the work that's already been put into this. Fun to see so many friends and neighbors. I was at the park with my 3-year-old immediately before this call, and he just
yay.
came from there. So all right, so I have lots of thoughts and comments. Many have already been stated in the chat. So Maria just very usefully named a number of things with regards to the play area that I would just echo here briefly. One of the big challenges currently is that there's one play structure, and so different ages of kids are often running over each other and not utilizing that very well. It would be very helpful to have at least 2 or even 3 separate play structures based on the size that are edge segregated appropriately. Obviously, resolving the wood chips and having a more modern surfacing is also, I imagine, would probably happen with that, but agree.
Yes.
Maria also had a great comment just about the landscape integration and the natural colors and things like that. I had made a comment in the chat earlier about shading and love the trees, particularly on the upper section. We of course want to retain those. They don't cover the direct play area where most of the benches are or where the kids are playing, and that equipment does get very hot. So I'm not a design person here, but if it was possible to have more trees on that top area strategically deployed around the play area in ways that actually created shade, if it was possible to have some kind of sails or even kind of play structures that just took into account the fact that it is open to exposed sun up there, and it does get very hot in the summers. The water feature is fantastic. Would love to see that retained and expanded. I also note that I think Boston Parks does such a lovely job with this, but many of the parks have something unique, some kind of unique feature that's oftentimes connected to a specific place and makes a particular playground kind of special. And I would love to see something like this here, something that isn't the case in the surrounding places. My personal favorite idea is something connected to the view. I think the view is one of the things that makes our park so amazing. So, obviously you have to be attentive to safety and things, but some kind of like tower observatory, particularly for the larger kids in the play area, would be wonderful. And for the rest of us, I think this would be an amazing park to have some kind of like tower viewer. If you're familiar with that idea, I had to look it up, so I didn't know it was called that, but tower viewer, I think, is the technical term, but it's basically like mounted spectacles that they would put in parks that often you would see at an overlook or near a harbor or something like that. Something like that over closer to the flags in a place where people could really enhance and take in the beautiful views would be really wonderful. I'm also an active basketball player. I use those courts all the time. Sometimes I use other courts because they're so slanted, the backboards, et cetera, et cetera. As you're redoing the courts, if the grade could be addressed as well as just resurfacing, they're kind of just all over the place, and it makes it difficult to play on for anybody playing basketball at the moment. Sounds like mural is already underway. I would love to see some signage in the park, some informational signage again, especially if you're creating some kind of lookout point, which I think there kind of already is there near the flagpole. Would be a great space for some kind of informational signage. And I'm not even sure that I know what would be best to put there. But whether it was something about the history of the park, which I know is quite interesting, and there's a lot of historical, the meeting house, and there's some history there that's relevant. We have lovely trees. Information about those could be wonderful. Information about what you're seeing, especially if you end up having some kind of spyglass situation there, could be really interesting. But some kind of just informational signage that helps educate people on what it is they're seeing, I think would be super lovely.
Great.
And I know also folks connected with, also active with Friends of Ronan Park, and I know Jeff and others may have better perspective there, but there had been conversation previously about the possibility of having some community accessible signs that were, you know, like poster board kind of situations, particularly near the entrances, in ways that are similar to Reverend Loesch Park over near Shawmut. They have some of those kinds of situations going on, where just like community events and things like that could be posted. I think near the dog park entrance in particular, and the main entrance on Mount Ida there that a lot of traffic happens through, would be really lovely places for some, you know, rotating signage that, you know, maybe somebody from Friends of Ronan could have access to. Sierra also noted this, but just, you know, if it was possible to create access down through the property as you're doing the retaining wall work, I think that would be absolutely tremendous. I don't know if that would be possible. Would also love to see, again, there's a lot of open space that doesn't really get used in that upper park area. Something like a pavilion with some picnic, again, it's really hot up there in areas that aren't immediately shaded, but like some kind of like a pavilion with some picnic tables, not something huge, but in some of the area that's currently not activated, I think would get a lot of use. There's already a lot of people that use things for birthday parties and other things that from the community and neighborhood. There might be a better area, but I guess my more emphatic feedback there would be, it'd be great to see areas in that upper park other than the playground area specifically. Obviously the playground area should be expanded, but it'd be great to activate those. I see some other comments that are also probably great ideas. Maybe it's fitness equipment for adults or something else.
So
But
Josh, I want
activating
to
that
move on. I
upper
want to
park.
make sure everybody gets a chance. Do you have
I'll stop there. Yeah,
That's perfect. Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you. It's a great list. This is fantastic. So thank you for your enthusiasm and support. Okay, Christina, I think is the last with the hand up, and then we'll go and move through the chat and find questions in there. Christina.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, thank you so much for this meeting. It's really cool to hear everybody's ideas. I just had one question, which is I understand that this project is focused on the upper park, and I'm wondering if that means basically at this point, are any considerations to the lower park like totally off the table? Just one of the things when I saw the sign that came to mind for me is like, I love how highly utilized this park is for all the, you know, in all the ways that we've already heard. I feel like the baseball diamond is kind of one area that is underutilized. Partially, probably, in my opinion, because it's a full-size baseball diamond. So like little league kids don't play on a field that large typically until they're in high school. And yeah, part of me wonders if like a consideration to changing it over to a full dirt field at the softball size and little league size might help that space be much more utilized at, you know, probably not a huge budget. So I guess my question is like, are we really not talking about the lower park at all? And that's an idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina.
Yeah, thank you. We're currently very focused on the upper park, but that's not to say that you can't make a comment like that about the lower park. And we hear you, Kathy and I and Michael on this call from Parks hear that. And it probably, Kathy, maybe you could speak more to that. If it's something that you kind of log for future capital projects.
Yeah, I think it would be a separate capital project. And I think before undergoing a spatial transformation like that, a programmatic field transformation like that, we would want to understand what the demand is across Dorchester. We do have limited number of full-size baseball fields in Dorchester. So they are so I think we would just want to understand what the full ramifications of that would be for on the permits and programming. I don't know the exact programming demand of the baseball field.
Yeah, I see like a lot of the schools utilizing Town Field now. And I see someone commented that the high school does still use it for practice. I noticed it 2 years ago, but not so much last year. And yeah, I mean, I guess I'm a baseball lover and a softball player and would love to just see more games on the field. So yeah, it's great to hear that leagues are using it. It just seemed greatly reduced over the last couple of years. So I'm not sure why that is. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Christina. So the chat is just amazing.
It's like almost hard to like,
It's a wonderful
you know, yeah.
reflection of all of you and of the park. So this is fantastic to scroll through this. And I think we're seeing some common themes, Jen, right?
Yes, yes. I was just gonna say sometimes we do public meetings and it's crickets on the chat. And in this case, there's just so much good content. It's I don't, there's no point in yeah, it's all covered in the chat. So it's really exciting to see.
I just want to see. So we're seeing, I think, clearly a need for shade. I think seeing it's clear that the programming is that all of you are there for events, but also there for more passive use, shade and play, clear points from all of you about shade and play and what you're looking for the redesign of the play area. I'm seeing, the trees we'll talk about more in the next meeting. Once we have the report, we'll have clear information to share with you. What else am I seeing in here? We've heard about basketball and some specifics about the court needing those upgrades, the heat. I just want to make sure we haven't missed any questions.
Kaki, there was a question that I can answer, which was
Great.
about, I can't find it. I think it was about budget and timeline. Are they officially committed? And this is the timeline official. Kathy got bumped off the call and she is rejoining. So I'm going to give her a minute before I answer this one.
Okay, so while she's still rejoining, I think there are also some comments from a few folks about noticing buildup of ice and that's really related to the drainage problems. And so we really do have that on our radars as we shared and have great civil engineering team with us and are going to really try to help mitigate and alleviate some of those observations you have about how stormwater collects.
A few comments about benches and picnic tables, also echoing some of the comments about what Josh had mentioned around expanding program at the Upper Ronan.
Veronica, I remember you from Geneva, so glad you're at this meeting too. That's great. And my gosh, you've seen butterflies, so that's amazing to know. And we can help try to build that up with any of our planting that we do. That's really amazing. Those of you that grew up here and have have also even a better handle on the history than we do. It's also wonderful to read all the history, drainage, trees, shade. What have we missed? This is, let's see. Splash pad comments noted. That's helpful with the play.
Sledding runs.
Sledding runs, yay for sledding.
I'm sure the last few weeks, right?
And then the signage comments were great that I think, was it Josh too, and others are making comments about the signage ideas are also really great. Is Kathy back with us?
Yes.
Oh, great. Okay.
Okay, so Kathy, there was a question in the chat while you were bumped off the call. I think I see you on the list here.
You got bumped off again. I'm re-adding her.
Oh man.
Oh. The woman with the answers.
Yes.
Trash bins, yes. Well, that's definitely something that's on our radar.
I'm seeing a request for like multi-use court.
Kathy should be back.
All right.
Sorry, I apologize. My computer decided to restart right
Oh,
now.
that's okay. There was just, I think we heard like the end of your previous answer, but then there was a following question about whether the budget and the timeline are officially committed to by the city. And I was hoping you could help me answer that so that I don't
For
misrepresent.
the park for the playground
Yes.
improvements.
Yes.
So I think we are thinking about applying for a grant from the state that it's a grant program that we have relied on several times in the past for parks across the city. We think this might be a good fit for that grant program. If we're successful in getting that grant, we would be tied to a very specific timeline for construction based on the states wanting to close out that project within a pretty tight timeline. So that grant application is typically due in July. So this work that we're doing right now is going to help us set up for putting in a really strong application for that. And then we may hear before the end of the year whether we get that, which would then mean, early 2026, we would put it out to bid. The first half of 2026, we'd put it out to bid for construction starting the second half of 2026. So that's the timeline that we're working towards. And I'm not sure in which direction there was a desire to shift that.
I think it was a general
Okay.
curiosity.
Yeah.
I'm seeing a question from Stella about field lights. Could they be on during the evenings in the fall, winter, starting in November? So that sounds like a lower park question, but with Kathy and Keisha on the line, maybe there could be, is there an answer for that? I don't know.
I think we have an off season for lights, water fountains,
Right.
and some other portions of the park just due to like use and
Yeah, the sports lights typically go off, go into vacation mode, or they're shut down seasonally. So we were able to get some additional operating funds in previous budgets that seems to be continuing to extend those basketball court lights specifically into through Thanksgiving as we get some warmer fall days. So that is continuing, and the field lights are tied to permits, so they are not on if there is not a permit holder who wishes to play. We do charge for the field lights. It's a nominal fee, but it does tend to just reduce the amount of just having them on. So that they also go into vacation mode, and they are tied to permits. And the lights, I think, are now on demand during the spring, summer, fall season.
Great. Let's see, I'm seeing a question about an area for drop off or pickup. Our scope of work really doesn't include out into the roadways so much. I don't know that we have a solution for that. And I know that there are logistical problems or dropping things off for events and such, but a specific vehicular drop off is could be unlikely. And I want to make sure that the QR code has been shown enough.
Let me jump to that. So here's the QR code for the community survey. If you missed the pulse check survey, this survey is a little bit more robust. It's asking for you to list out programs that are really important to you, programs that you're interested in seeing. It's asking about your wish for the parks, just to help us understand priorities. You've done a fantastic job of giving us feedback and priorities through the chat. So just a lot of great feedback for us to go through. But the community survey is there as well if you come up with something after the fact and you want to make sure that we hear it. We're definitely listening.
Yes, and please share this around with your neighbors and friends who couldn't make it today. We'd love to hear from even more.
I'm seeing more clarity too around more seating, more benches, picnic tables. That's great. The ADA paths, yes, that's what we were sort of trying to get at, is finding ways that some of those steeper areas might be able to be improved. This is just a great list of things to get us going. Very helpful, everyone. We really appreciate your participation tonight. And we want to please keep adding and respond to the survey. Would be great. And I don't know if there are any more questions. I don't see any other hands raised.
So our next steps is to take all this feedback from the pulse check survey, from this chat box, and then also the community survey. And then we will come up with some design options, which we will present to you, which start to try to capture these priorities and these wishes into a design. Jeff, it looks like your hand is up.
Would you be giving us an update about I don't know, the minutes or the chat even would be great.
Yes.
So we can review before the next meeting.
Yeah, that's something we could definitely post on the project webpage. And we will be posting this recording of this presentation and a file of the slides themselves so that someone could flip through just the slides. But we could add like a little recap or summary as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, anyone else would like to share anything in the chat or verbally? We'll give it maybe another minute.
You are here signs. I like that.
Nice. Okay, thank you all. Thank you all for joining tonight. Please continue to check the project webpage for updates. Feel free to email me with any questions or comments. I'll just put my email address in the chat one more time. All right, and with that, I hope you all have a wonderful evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
We're
you.
so glad
Thank
to
you,
see you,
everyone.
and we look forward to seeing you at the next meeting.
Thank you.
Have a great evening.
Thank you.